Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask real quickly, as the rest of the members of the full committee come in, we had worked with Senator Schaefer on Senate Resolution 402 yesterday, and we had told him we would get a meeting of the subcommittee. So would like to, at this time, convene subcommittee, telecommunications subcommittee of Chairman Parsons' full committee at this time. Brian has related to me that we do have a quorum of that subcommittee available. That subcommittee should have before them Senate Resolution 402 LC 361440 ERS. Members of the subcommittee have that piece of legislation. If you will recall, we had a sub drafted from the discussion the other day. Senator Schaefer is here. In the interest of time, let him speak to that if he wishes, but I think the subcommittee knows of what we spoke the other day. Essentially, what we did from the original resolution is we pared down the number of members on that. We made some changes that you will see on lines 37 through 38. And we will need to make, I will ask the subcommittee to entertain another amendment after universal service to insert interconnection, porting, as well. And the reason for doing that is in my haste, we had intercarrier relations, and we changed that to compensation, and we wanted to be broad enough that we allowed the committee to look into all those areas of intercarrier relations, but specifically enumerating compensation, interconnection, and porting. So if the committee moves forward on this resolution, I would like them to move forward with that amendment, inserting on line 38 after service, interconnection, porting, and that would be the changes we would use to LC 381440. Are there any questions? The author is present. Any members of the subcommittee have questions? Members of the full committee will get a shot at in just a few seconds, or a few minutes, at the call of the chair. Yes, sir.
Is it the response of the Senate that they're not going to deal with 168?
I have not yet had a hearing scheduled on that. Does Senator Schaefer acknowledge that, or?
You know, that's the first time I've heard that. I mean, we could do the same thing with some of these Senate bills. All right, that's it.
Was it, to the gentleman's point, maybe this study committee, they'll be studying the hard work that the former chairman of this committee worked on, Chairman Lucas, on 168, in a bipartisan effort to bring that forward. I'm sure Senator Schaefer will give that the proper airing at a time in the future. Any other questions in regards to Senate Resolution 402? There are no further questions. What's the pleasure of the subcommittee on Senate Resolution 402?
Second.
I have a motion and a second that this do pass. For clarification, as amended, as I suggested to your second, is that it well? Yes, sir.
We'll probably actually have to take an action on the amendment, or at least see if there's an opposition on the amendment, and then pass on.
Okay, I would ask that. I had presented the bill with that amendment, but I will ask, is there, I have a motion and a second to approve the bill. If there's not objection, the chair of the subcommittee would like to offer an amendment to that measure to insert on line 38 after service, interconnection, porting, If the committee doesn't have an objection for the chair offering that, I'd like to offer that as an amendment and ask, is there an objection to that amendment? Any objection? I ask again, any objection? Hearing none, we'll adopt the amendment and move forward on the original motion as amended. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the proposition LC 361440 ERS do pass recommendation with the amendment. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. That is approved. At this time, Brian asked you to draft a committee, or go with the committee substitute we have with that amendment. No further business for the subcommittee. We'll stand adjourned and turn it over to Chairman Parsons. Thank you, Chairman Parsons, for allowing us to do this.
Chairman. Okay, we're going to call the committee meeting to order. The House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee is hereby called to order. Chairman May, would you give the committee a subcommittee report on Senate Bill 30? Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought you were trying to tell me something, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Thank you. Yeah, after many hours of debate and separate meetings from all sides, Senate Bill 30 passed out of subcommittee with a do-pass recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman May. All right, Senate Bill 30 is back to the full committee. You know, I was in the last subcommittee meeting on Senate Bill 30. I watched the CD or the DVD of the first meeting, so I've heard all the testimony, and I know that there's a couple of issues that. First of all, I want to express my appreciation to Chairman May and the members of the subcommittee. I do believe that there's a couple of issues with that bill that, as it is right now, have not been addressed, and that relates to the I think it's the 45 county non-attainment area, and the other one dealing with trademarks. The chair had a substitute drawn up today that would have dealt with both of those issues. I've talked to our lawyers, and our lawyers say that there is a possible constitutional problem with addressing and carving out the 45 county, I think it's 45 county metro area. So, therefore, it is the intent of the chair. This is what I'm going to do. That bill is going to stay in the committee. We're not going to take any action on it this time. And Senator Tolleson, I appreciate it. Chairman, I appreciate all your hard work. I appreciate those of you who came to meetings and the testimony and the time you put into this. I do feel because of that, because of those issues, particularly the constitutional issue, that at this time, until we can come up with some way to address that and address the 45 county non-attainment area, I don't think it would be wise for us to go ahead and proceed at this time and proceed with that. But I do appreciate you, the time you put into it, and but the bill will be held right here in the committee. Thank you. And okay, Senator Tolleson, if you would like, I would respect you and give you the opportunity. If there is anything you'd like to say to us or address to us, I'd certainly give you that opportunity. If you want to come over to the mic, right over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say to Chairman May, the subcommittee, I want to thank him for the job he did. We put a lot of hours into this bill. I think the concerns on the 45 county area are basic concerns that are brought just because that's the way the rules and regs are written. In dealing with this issue, new rules and regs would be would be written to allow this to move forward. Once the law has been passed and this becomes the law of the land, then new rules and regs would be written to deal with that. So I think constitutionally, the law would set forth what the policy of this state would be. We have worked very hard on this. This bill basically is making sure that the independent businesses in the state of Georgia can continue to grow their businesses and be involved in energy solutions for this state, and that's very important. What we're doing is by sitting on this, we're putting roadblocks for the continuing development of alternative fuel business in this state. The state's worked very hard to invest money in alternative fuels, to continue to grow the alternative fuel business. It's not only a state issue, but it's a national issue. On the federal scene, they're pushing more and more, pushing more and more for the growth of alternative fuels. And what we're doing here today is putting a roadblock into that growth of the alternative fuels. So with that, I think the bill is a good bill. I think the bill is for creating alternative fuels. I've worked very hard to, was it last year, it all runs together, to try to help put a pipeline in for to help the major oil companies. I'm a proponent of both big oil and small oil in this state. If we don't continue to foster, if we start putting up roadblocks for alternative fuels, then we've just killed all the work that this General Assembly has done the last few years in this state on investing in alternative fuels. So it's the prerogative of the chair to do what he wants to do with the bill. This bill is about the growth of independent business in the state of Georgia, of creating alternative fuels for this state, to help this state in times of not only in normal times, but also in times of crisis. When we had a crisis in the Gulf with the hurricanes and all, the alternative fuel business in this state supplied millions and millions of gallons of fuel to this state. So we would have had a much bigger crisis in this state had it not been for the investment of independent businesses in this state. So I would say that what we're doing today is telling independent business in this state that I'm sorry, you don't need to be in the ball game. So with that, it's the will of the chair to do what he wants with this bill, and so be it. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. Thank you. And we have some questions from the committee. We need to move on. So if we take any action on any legislation, we can get it to we can get it out here as quickly as possible so they can go to rules. But we will take some. I don't know who was first. Representative Lucas.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, is there any possibility that those questions that you said were presented as far as a constitutional problem about the bill itself, is there any way that we might be able to get those answered and possibly meet again on this bill?
It is possible. Anything is possible. I think as long as something got out by probably 5 o'clock tomorrow, it probably could still be considered by rules. I mean, if any member here, any members would like to see if they can address that. In fact, I tell you what I'll do. I'll go a step further than that. I'm going to appoint a special subcommittee. Chairman Geisinger, would you chair a subcommittee? Chairman Geisinger, Chairman Martin, Chairman May, Chairman Smith, and former Chairman Lucas. If y'all could get together and if you can come up with some ways, this evening or in the morning that we could address those issues and can get back with me, I'll be more than happy to take another look at it. Thank you. See, I don't know who was next. Number 16. You weigh, okay. Number 27.
One of the issues I think we voted on, didn't we, in subcommittee, and it didn't get a second? Chairman May?
Chairman
you,
May,
Mr.
I think you have, if you want to try to address the question.
Are you, Representative Williams, are you referring to the
Not the-
amendment that dealt with the 45
No, the other issue.
with,
Chairman's
with,
got.
with regard to trademark?
Yeah.
There was an amendment that was offered that dealt with the trademark concern, and I'm trying to one of the and Brian, you may be able to answer one of them. I think one of the amendments failed, and the other one
Didn't
failed,
get a-
died
didn't get a
because of lack
second.
of a second. If I believe that's, I'm not sure which one failed and which one didn't receive the second.
Do you remember, Hardy?
All right, thank you. We have, I think, one more question. Is it Representative Williams? Okay. 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 Senate Resolution 402, and I was going to take that up first. I apologize, but I want to get that that unpleasantness taken care of. Senate Resolution 402 by Chairman Schaefer from the Senate.
This resolution simply creates a joint study committee to look at the question of telecommunications reform. I'm convinced that the Telecommunications Act of 1995 needs to be updated. I know that y'all have struggled with that issue during this session of the legislature, and even with the benefit of a House-only study committee last year, it's been troublesome. I'd like to get both the House and the Senate looking at this issue together so that we can hopefully come to some resolution in a comprehensive fashion in the next session of the General Assembly. I support all the changes to the resolution made by your subcommittee and would ask your favorable consideration of the
Thank you.
substitute.
Thank you, Chairman. Any questions? We do have a question from Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I think it just report this out. Everyone heard earlier in the subcommittee, but it did come out with a do pass recommendation. There's two similar pieces of legislation that are LC numbers, just LC 361446 ERS. Just want to make sure that since we did that at a late date, that we report that up to the committee appropriately. At the proper time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. There is an additional perfection, just verbiage that we need to make in the resolution,
Okay,
if you would allow.
recognized for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for an amendment to the bill. There was a word inadvertently left out when we changed relations to compensation on line 37. We need to insert between of and compensation. We need to say inter-carrier, insert that word. So I would ask we amend LC 361446 ERS, accept that amendment, or remove that amendment to the bill, whichever is proper.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries.
If I may continue, Mr. Chairman, then I would move to do pass LC 361446 ERS as amended by committee substitute.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I see no discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries, and this will move on to the Senate Resolution 402. Will move on to the House Rules Committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Senate Bill 194. Is Senator Chance here? Okay. And I forgot if you give a subcommittee report. I'm sorry, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this was a much less controversial piece of legislation, but this SB 194 passed out of subcommittee unanimously with a do pass recommendation.
Thank you. You're recognized to represent the bill.
Thank you, Mr.
You
Chair.
can present it right there from your chair if you'd like.
Thank you. In brief, SB 194, it allows different departments and agencies it in essence puts another tool in the toolbox, which allows them to acquire, for instance, new lighting fixtures or water conserving products without having to ask for an additional appropriation for the funding. The money they will continue to pay their lighting bill without having to go ask for instance, the Department of Corrections needed $60 million to upgrade the light fixtures and install water conserving products. In effect, they would continue to pay the same amount, receiving the savings, and then say, for instance, in year 11, they would see a net savings of $6 million every year thereafter because of the upgraded fixtures, and again, at no additional cost to the taxpayers.
All right. Thank you. You have a question if you'd like to take it?
Absolutely.
Okay, looks like first, who's at 24? Somebody at 24 have a question? Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't hear very well in here, but who brought this bill?
From the Senate, Senator Chance brought it, and GIFA has.
I'm sorry, who?
Senator Ronnie Chance.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it doesn't require any department or agency to do things. Boards of education currently do something very similar, but in order for a state agency or department to do it, we have to allow them the option to do so. So again, it doesn't require them to do it, but it just allows them to upgrade their fixtures and appliances without any additional cost to the taxpayers. And ultimately, the taxpayers will see savings because of the reduced cost of the of energy consumption and water consumption.
Mr. Chairman, why is the Senator Chance not here to present his bill?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Why is Senator Chance not here to present his bill?
He had asked me to carry it for him in the House, to be the sponsor and carry it in the House. And I just told him that I would present the bill on his behalf.
Does that answer your question, Chairman Smith? I believe that the senator, I believe he had the understanding that he did not need to be here today. I don't think that we can. I think that was his understanding, and that's why he's not here. And I didn't request that he come, but we didn't have a conversation, so.
Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be wise if the senator would come here. I've left 2 or 3 messages for him to call me on some other legislation. He has not returned a phone call. Maybe he's not in the building.
I understand completely. I have a bill in his committee that I thought was going to be taken up yesterday and was not taken up yesterday. I still haven't received any notification it's going to be taken up. So I understand your concern.
He had not. I left a note on his door this morning. He hadn't returned a phone call. Okay. Chairman, I don't know what the time of this bill is, but I would like to see the Senator Chance to present his bill, and it's a pleasure of this committee.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Phil Foyle with GIFA is here, and I think would like to speak to this.
Well, I will say this, Chairman Smith. I appreciate what you're saying very much. You can blame me for this one. It's a very good point. A point well taken. I believe he most likely had the understanding that he did not need to come here today, that the chairman of the subcommittee was going to present it for him, but I think that we do need to make sure that in the future that we express to whoever the author of the bill is that they need to come and present it. The others have come here today. I know we have another senator here waiting to present his bill. I will take the blame for that one, but it's a very good point. Very well taken. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I do think we need, because of the day and because of the hour, we need to go ahead and move on with this bill. And it was Chairman May's understanding that he would present it. So I don't want to interfere with his presentation of the bill. But thank you. Chairman Martin has a question. There you go.
I guess I'll go with Chairman May here. You piqued my interest when you said corrections and $60 million since I do their budget.
As an example.
I understand, but it piques my interest because where are they to get that $60 million?
That's the great part. They don't have to put out any money whatsoever. You mean if they wanted to upgrade the fixtures?
Right.
They would have to ask for an appropriation.
Okay, so it would in fact cost the state additional money.
If, in that example, yes. In that example, yes. That's why, rather than them have to request to the state an additional appropriation of $60 million to pay for upgraded fixtures, this allows them to do it at no additional taxpayer expense. And because of the energy savings.
Well, not to belabor the point, but somebody's going to pay for the fixtures. I mean, I understand there are companies out there. Honeywell does this. They do HVAC systems where they come in and sell you the system, and you give them a portion of your savings in the future. But,
correct.
You know, there's a couple things in the legislation. I mean, these are, I think, substantive. I'm not trying to belabor the point. The chairman's ready to move on. But on line 57 through 58, you strike the portions of the current language that says the contract shall terminate absolutely and without further obligation on the part of the agency at such time when the agency determines actual savings or incremental revenue gains are not being generated to satisfy the obligation of the contract. Why did we strike that?
Well, if you read on down under paragraph, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm trying to piece it all together, so you can probably. We just didn't go through the. I wasn't advantaged to be at that subcommittee, so just tell me the safeguards we have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It goes down, if you read into paragraph 3, and I mean I can read it out, but it says in addition to any remedies available, it requires them to, the actual savings or incremental change gains are not being generated to satisfy the obligations of the contract. The vendor shall be required to remedy the deficit in actual savings or incremental revenue gains. It in effect restates the language that was stricken.
No, with due respect, I differ there. It says the vendor shall be required to remedy the deficit in actual savings. Does that mean fix the equipment? I mean, refund the money? What does a learned attorney can tell me this perhaps? But what does remedy the deficit in actual savings mean? Does that mean fix the energy savings, or does that mean provide us money back? I mean.
And I don't know if you want to.
I'm not trying to be.
Oh, no, that's fine.
No.
Good question. I will, and if you would, I just ask this: when you have a question that requires somebody from an agency or public to speak, I just ask that you've done what you do. Ask it through the chair, and I will then ask the presenter if he would like to have somebody answer the question. Otherwise, I don't want just people coming up from agencies and speaking in full committee, but. Chairman May, would you like to have somebody from an agency
yes,
speak
please,
to that?
I can state it, or it might be easier if Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to allow them to give a brief summary and may answer any other questions with regard to. They may be able to explain it succinctly in a manner that would.
As long as it is succinctly. Okay. Yes.
Please, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Phil Foyle, the Director of the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority, and with me today is David Godfrey, who oversees our state utility program. He can answer the specifics to the representative's questions if it pleases the chair. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did have to address several issues in the existing statute. Some of them were legal impediments to the state going forward and doing this. The specific section I think Representative Martin addressed, we had some sections in the existing law that basically gave an agency kind of a blank check to terminate agreements or contracts basically at will. Those were not very acceptable to folks in the business community, so we went back and revisited some of those. If you go through Section B in the law or proposed changes, we have sections where we do structure it so that you have a termination clause at the end of each fiscal year. Then the agency does have to take a positive step to renew that. Another feature or a lack of a feature in the existing statute was that we didn't have a mechanism in there so that in the structuring of a typical benefits-based or performance contracting agreement, if the savings of a contract do not materialize, then the energy service company is required to make up the gap or guarantee those savings. We didn't have a mechanism in that law so that the company would be required to do that. So we did strike some of the existing provisions and rewrite that so that we would either require that they make good on those guarantees, or if they were unable to do that, we put in surety provisions or insurance so that they would make good in that eventuality. Does that cover your question?
Brief follow-up, if I could.
Yes.
Please. I know we're running. Okay, so I understand we can't enter prior to a multi-year contract with somebody, and we want to be able to do that, and we want to have that. So is your testimony that what we see there on 60 through 69, the remedy clause would be for them to actually pay the state back if the savings weren't there? That's the way you read the statute allowing them. I guess that would be done contractually on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, sir.
But this would allow the last question is, companies are out there doing this without any cost to the vendors are out doing this without any cost to a company. Are we about to allow us to enter into contracts where we would actually pay them and pay them back with savings? Or do you tend to go to some more of the commercially available contracts where they'll put the new system in and we pay them back a percentage of the savings over the time? Is that what we're talking about?
The latter would be the case. And that's really a traditional way of doing that. Private sector has been doing that. Federal government since the 70s in other states. So, yes, the latter would be the case.
All right. That answer your question, Chairman
Yes,
Martin?
sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Williams has a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Could the gentleman come back? Little flag just went up. On page 4, looking at line 112 to 115 or 116, I'm just concerned here that could you have sub-vendors here in this piece of this paragraph? It seemed to me like you can have a sub-vendor, a vendor, and then a sub-vendor doing the work. Is that true? Looking at this.
Well, I think it would be very typical that you might have a lead corporation or lead business that would be the enter into the contract with the state agency, and then they would have subcontractors who might do specialty type work. But the primary contract would be between the agency and the primary corporation or business.
Just a smaller follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that vendor do not complete the work. I'm looking here that if they're terminated, that the funds would go back into the general fund. I'm a little bit confused. Help me in here.
Which
line 112, 113.
Okay, that section actually pertains to the set up or establishment of the fund for reimbursement to the contractors. So as the savings are accruing, then that's put into what's called a dedicated fund, and then that would be used for the actual reimbursement to the company providing the energy services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think we have one more question. Chairman Smith, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I finally got my hearing device to work after everything, and I really didn't hear the presentation. Obviously, the author wasn't here to present it. And could you tell me exactly what this bill does, and who did you bring this bill, or who's wanting this piece of legislation?
GFA has been working on this for a number of months. We've actually been working with private sector and industry on trying to construct this. It is kind of the result of some study efforts that the state engaged in about a year and a half ago to find a way to do this through multi-year lease type agreements. So this is kind of the culmination of work that we actually began about a year and a half ago. The basic concept for it is similar to what's been done in federal government, state government. You actually can contract with private sector company. They'll identify a number of energy saving measures. They could be lighting retrofits. It might be HVAC equipment or the like. And then once you identify those, agree on what the savings are, then that payment stream actually comes from guaranteed savings that the company provides to the agency, as a result of the measures that are undertaken. So if you've got, when Chairman May was talking about no additional outlay of funds for the state, you would basically be taking this from the payment stream that you normally would have for payment of your utilities, out of your electricity or natural gas or other utilities. So you get a guarantee reduction of that utility payment, use that guarantee amount to basically pay for the financing of the energy improvements. At the end of the 10-year term, which is specified in the amendments here, the state has new equipment, new lighting, new infrastructure, and then you are able to realize the savings at the end of that term.
Do you do this in every occurrence, or at what point do you decide you're going to use this mechanism?
Well, that's a very good question, and it might not be appropriate everywhere. I think if you get into if you start looking at lower cost, if you were looking at something under $500,000 or so, you probably would not want to go to the trouble of doing this. I mean, there is time and time associated with working with the contractor and actually coming to agreement on what you want to do. So you have to factor that into it. But if you're getting into several $1 million worth of energy improvements, then as Chairman May said, this is yet another tool, not mandatory of course, but another tool that state agencies will have at their disposal for trying to achieve energy savings. And I'd be remiss in saying that one of the impetus for this is the governor's energy challenge, where he directed agencies to reduce energy use by 2020 by 15%. So that's really a driver behind this for a lot of the executive agencies.
So one more question, Chairman. So we got some other questions. We do need to try to move on.
Is this a low bid or is this an RFP or both?
We'd be doing good competitive. We're working on trying to develop that process now, but we have been in consultation with the Department of Administrative Services. We're trying to structure a user-friendly process so that we'd be able to get competitive requests from competing companies and make an evaluation on their technical capabilities as well as the cost.
So you're saying you could either do a low bid or you could do an RFP. There's a big difference there in a lot of cases. And that's what is this legislation going to leave it open-ended as to what you do in a low bid or RFP?
We do not specifically address that in the legislation, no, sir.
Thank you. Chairman Smith, you think you got your questions answered? Working on it? Okay. Vice Chairman Geisinger, recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
I believe this will be the proper time.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Senate Bill 194, which is LC 140042S, do pass.
Okay. Can you make that in form of motion? I believe, don't we normally make these House committee substitutes? If you make that in form of House committee substitute to Senate Bill 194.
I do.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there a second? We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying no. This motion passes, and this Senate Bill 194 House Committee Substitute passes on to the Rules Committee of the House. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman May. Chairman May, I think you have do you have a committee report on Senate Resolution 12? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me turn. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Senate Resolution 12, we heard in committee, and it was passed unanimously with a do pass recommendation.
All right. Thank you. Senator Pearson, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here to present Senate Resolution 12, and Chairman May, appreciate the opportunity and support out of your committee. Chairman, I have here some books from the Georgia Geologic Survey, titled one entitled Oil Test in Georgia, one entitled Petroleum Exploration Wells in Georgia, Oil Seeps in Georgia, and another later version of Oil Wells in Georgia, which just goes to tell us that there is in fact oil in Georgia. And this body, back in 1958, saw fit to
create a reward, if you would, of $250,000 for the first person or company who would put down a commercially producing oil well in Georgia. And the definition there, commercially producing, would be 100 barrels or more of oil a day. As you can see from the literature and the effort that the state made in exploration and in describing the efforts that were being made, it was serious business then, and it's obviously serious business now. So what we have proposed in this resolution, which would necessitate an underlying bill, the enabling bill, to be drafted afterwards if this would in fact pass both bodies this year, to prepare it for the voters in 2010, would be simply to update through inflation the reward, and then to add to it natural gas, because we know we have natural gas deposits along with some of these oil deposits in Georgia, then to segregate it into onshore and offshore. Additionally, we would provide that there would be a provision for a reward for a non-fossil fuel or renewable type of energy to be determined, and that would have to be worked out, the definition of that, in the underlying bill, as well as a conservation provision for some type of conservation or energy saving device or method or mean to be put in there. The whole point of this is that if we as a country are going to achieve energy independence, it's going to start by each state doing all that they can to participate as they're able with the natural resources or the other options that are available to us. And as we all know, we've been a leader in bio, in both the corn-based as well as the fiber-based ethanol. We know we have resources in oil and gas onshore and offshore. We know from the success of the Soneva company that's decided to base here and has a $1 billion backlog of orders, that solar is applicable in some areas and in some capacities. The options for wind are somewhat limited because the only place where we can do wind in and of itself would be up along the Appalachian Trail in our district, and I think Representative Amerson would agree with me. We probably don't want the Appalachian Trail covered up with bird beaters, but again, this is simply taking what the state has already said was an appropriate position and recognizing that in 50 years things have changed, but we still need to work towards energy independence. Again, the provisions would have to be laid out in a bill that would necessarily have to start in your body, and we'd be glad to work with the members of this committee or any that see fit to participate in drafting that should this bill resolution pass this year. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take questions if there is any.
Thank you. Interesting proposition. Any questions of the senator? We do have a question. Chairman Bob Smith, I believe it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for honoring us with your presence today. My good friend from
it's my
Dawson
honor,
County.
Representative.
My good friend from Dawson County. The dollar amounts, do you have anything in mind? $250,000 was a big number back 50 years ago. What are you thinking today?
It would be $1.8 million would be the number if we just used an inflation adjuster. And what I would suggest would be, you'd probably round that up to $2 million for the onshore, and then the offshore would need to be substantially more just because the investment that would have to be there, I mean, maybe in the $5 to $8 million range. On the renewable, non-fossil, and the conservation method, again, that could probably be somewhere in between the two. And we do know of some efforts underway in the state right now along both of those lines that may yield some promise. So again, I think it's a worthy endeavor because the body again 50 years ago said it was worthwhile, and I think again for us as a country to become energy independent, it's going to take 50 states doing all they can collectively.
Mr. Chairman, one more. How many awards are you planning? What, 10, 15, 20 of these?
No, sir. There would only be, if we drafted it in concert with the existing legislation, there would be one reward. one reward given for the first person or company who meets the criteria of that reward. So in the case that all four of these proposals are met and the criteria met, there would be 4 rewards in 4 different categories.
Thank you, Chairman Smith.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Geisinger is recognized.
Senator, as I expressed in the subcommittee, I applaud you for what you're doing because this makes all the sense in the world. What's exciting about it is that somebody will make an investment, and when they do, and they do find oil, the state of Georgia will benefit greatly. So we're not talking about an out-of-pocket negative loss. We're talking about some big gains, and I compliment you for your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And as being from this industry, certainly, Representative, you know that the investment that would be necessary from the private sector to facilitate a well such as 100 barrels or more a day would be substantial in and of itself. The collection system, the manifolds, especially for gas. But let me make the committee aware that that effort is underway now in Alabama in what they call the Gadsden Belt, which according to what we've read in an article in AJC in 2007, comes up into Rome and Floyd County and Chattooga County, and they believe up into Whitfield County. So it's there. It's just the question is the price right, and can it be extracted at a cost-effective manner, and then the infrastructure put in place to make a collection of wells profitable. So this is just a little incentive out there to get the private sector engaged.
Thank you. Representative Scott has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, am very excited about the prospects of this, and obviously in 4 categories, plus I presume also the 5th category on page 2, lines 34 and 35 there as well with alternative energy sources. Very excited about the prospects of this, not only for what it could provide by way of energy independence for this country and for this state, but also for jobs and economic development. I do appreciate you bringing this, and at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a motion to pass.
Okay, this may be Chairman Smith. Do you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, at the proper time, make a motion.
Okay, you were already you've been trumped by Representative Scott. Representative Scott, I reckon you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to pass for SR 12, LC 255492S. Make a motion to pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to ask our legislative counsel and our aide. I mentioned before about committee substitute. At this juncture, maybe we shouldn't do that.
I talked to Ryan about it. As long as we don't make a change in here,
Okay.
the substitute that's before us is what is.
Okay, I don't want to do anything that would slow the process down either. So, okay. 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 Early on, it might have been an idea, but okay. So we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by saying no. The motion carries, and Senate Resolution 12 moves on to the House Rules Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And with that, this committee meeting, which probably will be the last one of the session, is adjourned.